Welcome to Laurier's Teaching Excellence Conversation Series. I'm Mary Wilson, Vice Provost Teaching and Learning at Wilfrid Laurier University. And throughout this series, I'm joined by recipients of the Donald F. Morgenson Awards for Teaching Excellence to celebrate their exceptional teaching practices, learn about their teaching philosophies, and discuss the future of higher education teaching and learning. Today, I'm with Meena Sharify-Funk from Laurier's Department of Religion and Culture in the Faculty of Arts. Meena received the 2021 Faculty Mentoring Award. Her empathetic and compassionate approach to mentorship develops the whole person and seeks to recognize and honor the individual as they pursue their academic and life goals. Inclusion and diversity are embedded throughout Meena's mentorship, and her passion, care, and guidance stretch throughout her students' whole lives. Welcome, Meena.
Oh, thank you, Mary. It's lovely to be with you.
Very glad to have you join me today in this conversation. Given that we're going to talk about mentorship, can you tell us a little bit about your mentors and what influence they've had on you?
You know, I have been very, very fortunate to have had an amazing PhD supervisor by the name of Abdul Aziz Saeed, a wonderful professor who was born and raised in Mesopotamia. And there aren't that many professors who can say that within, of course, the Western sphere. And, you know, I'm actually currently interested, I've co-authored a festschrift in his honor. And, you know, Professor Saeed taught me so many different aspects of being a teacher, of being a human. And, you know, for all of my courses, Mary, ever since I've taught at Laurier, at the beginning of each course, I give a handout. And on one side is my favorite poem by Constantine Cavafy named Ithaca, which is a poem, of course, about the journey of learning. And it's a lifelong, of course, journey. The other side are thoughts by Professor Saeed. And I thought it might be nice just to share some of those thoughts, just to give a taste of who he was. He asks a question: why do we come to the university? We come to the university because of one another. We are one another's most important resource on the road to learning. We cannot learn alone. The purpose of our getting together is to maximize one another's resources. Everyone is important because every one of us is a teacher and a student. Education is learning how to learn what we want to know. As you learn, and as I experience your learning, I in turn learn. You can count on me to teach you to learn, and I can count on you to teach me to teach. We work together. And so from those thoughts, you get a sense of what kind of a mentor he was to me. You know, he taught me that each student is, you know, the best resource that you can have in the classroom, that the diversity of our students, of course, mirrors that of the larger world. You know, he was known for saying the whole world needs the whole world, and you can see it in the classroom. Yeah, you know, he also taught me, you know, how to be a global citizen, you know, how to care, especially how to care about, you know, justifying your means in order to justify your ends, especially as a scholar and as a learner. How do we analyze? How do we theorize? What are the ends to our theory and analysis? And what does that do for the greater whole? He always pointed toward the greater whole. And so I'm very, very, very grateful to have had him in my life. There have been other beautiful mentors, and I'll just mention real briefly, you know, Dr. Michel Desjardins. You know, he taught me about the grace in the arts. He taught me about collegiality amongst faculty. Do you know that I started at Laurier in 2007, and within a week of starting, I had my beloved Mikhail, my baby, and then I had to teach a week after. And Michel came into the classroom the first time I was teaching with a cup of tea. And then he told all the students, he said, "Do you know that your professor just had a child a week ago?" Yeah, that's grace in the academy. And so, of course, you try to pay it forward. You try to pay it forward in any way you can, especially within teaching.
So you've had some profound mentorship experiences. And when you talk about carrying it forward and you reflect on how Dr. Saeed and Dr. Desjardins were able to help you to gain those perspectives through their mentorship. Do you translate that into both words and actions in your classroom quite deliberately? And what have you found to be the most effective invitational strategies for students when you're, trying to fulfill that mentorship role, which is so important for the holistic development of our students, that they appreciate fully that we are invested in them beyond the weeks we spend together in a specific course, but that we feel, a profound obligation and duty of care to their deeper development as an individual, as a future citizen, as a future parent, as a neighbor, as a member of society. How do you do that in concrete ways within your courses, Meena?
Well, those mentors help me to understand the whole person, that our students, of course, are beyond the classroom, and they bring that beyond into the classroom, which can make the most magical moments, things that you can never prepare for in a lecture. And then you have to stop. You have to stop what you have prepared in order to just go there. And there have been many moments I call of the magic of diversification that comes into the classroom that helps, of course, learning in ways that are so unexpected and so needed. That's the dialogical, right? That's where you find the logos in action.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's interesting with the whole person. As professors, Mary, we of course have been trained to be content experts. That's a big part of what we long to share. But I also have always believed, and I did learn this from Professor Saeed and Professor Desjardins, is that, we're also facilitators, we're catalysts. And the more that I experience the classroom, I think I'm becoming, I don't know if I'll ever claim I am, a storyteller. That stories are, a way to transport students to different contexts, settings, worldviews, perspectives. And what's neat about stories too is they can help the student in reimagining people's, self and other, times, places, you name it. And with that, of course, in being inspired by those beautiful mentors and having the experience in the classroom, you start to develop your own methods, right? Your own teaching ways to integrate the knowledge that you hope.
Yeah, and I find often that is something that evolves in our teaching practice, as you were talking about that transition from, a focus on the content and a sense of great obligation to make sure that we provide the students with the access to the knowledge that we're endeavoring to cultivate in them. and that can become so dominant early on in our careers that it sometimes does take some mentorship, some examples, some reflection in our own teaching practice before we have the ability to be more present dynamically in the classroom environment. So that, what was the term that you used for that moment in a classroom where things open up?
Well, they are dialogical, but they're also like the diversification of knowledge.
Diversification of knowledge. Yes, I like casting it in that way. I think that's a really great way to house it. So to have that sort of integration in your teaching practice, where you can hold simultaneously the individual learners in front of you and their needs, interests, their positionality relative to the learning, to each other, to you, the content of the course, its outcomes, and that invitational moment to lift the current conversation in the class beyond to something more profound because a door opened. And I think early in our careers as educators, we're not always comfortable acknowledging the doors cracked open in our classrooms, and have hesitancy of entering into it, because then we get off script as educators. And that is a leap of faith, I think, for many of us to have the ability to do that. So having those mentors, those models for that kind of approach, and the sort of validation of the importance of walking through the door with the students is an important component of it as well. I won't pronounce the name properly, so I won't go there, but we recently lost the scholar, the philosopher who wrote The Theory of Flow. I think this week earlier. And that I find a compelling way to consider mastery of teaching practice as being the equivalent of flow, because it's that profound presence, the integration of your skills as an educator, and the sort of communal nature of the connection with students in a classroom that is so rewarding when you have those moments, right? It's so privileging to have those moments in a classroom.
Before the pandemic, what I used to do at the beginning of each term, I used to just go walking around the campus and listening in to different classrooms. I wouldn't go in, but it always reminded me of how some of the greatest professors are those who disappear in the classroom so their subject can appear. And, Mary, I think that's wonder. And I know, you guys asked me what, is one habit or something that you can instill in the student. And, to wonder, to be curious, to question the questions, to, of course, have insatiable desire to know. And I thought it would be fun just to share real quick how, there's so many different polymaths that inspire wonder who have been connected to the Academy. And, there's so many stories that I could evoke. But one that I think is such a beautiful story is, of course, of Leonardo da Vinci. He was asked by a student, "What is your pedagogy? What do you want to teach?" And then he writes in his notebooks that he knew exactly the moment of when that answer came to him. And then he shares how when he was a child in the village of Vinci in Italy, he used to go by a cave. And that cave terrified him. It petrified him. And yet it fascinated him. It intrigued him. And he knew he had to go in, but he was completely afraid to do so. So of course he had to face his fears. And in facing his fears and going in the cave, once he went in, all he wanted to do was know everything. And if you know Da Vinci, right?
Yeah.
He started to see the interconnections of so many different disciplines, of so many ways of knowing. And, he calls it, this idea of being the child of the moment and helping people to see things as they really are. Whoa. And I do feel like, wow, if you can try at all to point to that potential, which is ultimately the spirit and the heart of the Academy to myself, then, yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I have to share with you that because I'm in an office currently with blank walls, the background that you see right now is an image that I took of Da Vinci's studio at Toulouse. So we share an appreciation.
Oh, that is perfect.
Yeah, for that polymath perspective, which is to learn as many different frames of inquiry, as many different methodologies as possible, and to integrate those dynamically in the pursuit of curiosity, that is what is so rewarding in our lives. And if we can instill that in our students, that will serve them and feed them throughout their lives. It will help them to get through their studies successfully, but then it will help them to make their lives more rewarding and rich long into the future. So I think validating that, helping students to set aside all of the burdens of social stricture they have, concerns about being wrong, concerns about making mistakes, about the enormous effort sometimes in learning disciplines and approaches that are unfamiliar to us, and how that can sometimes be discouraging, but it's so brilliant when you're able to acquire some of those perspectives and knowledge approaches. And when you learn how to learn through the university, right? I think absolutely.
Well, that's the cave, right? That there's so many different caves in life. And so whenever you come across an idea or anything that creates a boundary of your familiarity, that's the cave. And helping students to know that ideas know no boundaries, and that's one thing, Mary. I don't know if you feel this, but I do feel that students, like when you think about, for instance, the future of the Academy, I do feel like in my 15 years, students are wanting more and more understanding of relational thinking. That they know that civilizations haven't been in isolation. They know their cultures and histories have not been in isolation, that there have been patterns of connection, of course, distinct differences as well, but there's nonetheless that mutual, relation.
Yeah, again, the profound nature of the complex problems and opportunities that we have now, that this generation will grapple with. If we are able to provide them access to those knowledge bases, those methods of inquiry, of critical thinking, of problem solving, and also the facility in working in collaboration with one another across difference to solve problems. I think that will be a good accomplishment for us in
Mm-hmm.
university education now, and something that we're uniquely capable of doing. So that's what you see around the future of teaching at Laurier, is a greater emphasis in development of that.
I do feel that there is this thirst, you could say, for more of the complexity, for understanding, of course.
Yeah, and I really want to validate that for our students, that is what is most needed in society right now.
I mean, when you think of Doctors Without Borders, there are teachers without borders.
Yes.
And that is a push in humanity to, of course, grapple with the great challenges that we're facing, but in a way that really, can take us to the next level of imagination. And I always do say that, Mary, that students have the ability to take humanity to the next level if they want to. They don't know.
And I think when we state those values overtly in our classes and we enact them in our classrooms, then that helps us to dissuade students from those more transactional superficial approaches to credential gathering, and helps them to see learning different.
Very much so.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. A lot of students have remarked over the years how they remember the stories, and how, of course, like, I'll give you an example. Now, if you bring in a material object, object, like I travel all over the world, all of us love to travel, even though, of course, the last 2 years have been crazy. But most souls who are in the academy love to travel and to experience the diversity. And of course, you bring those stories back into the classroom. And you also have, of course, material culture from those travels. And so I do like to bring material culture in, because an object can have so many different stories intertwined within it. And it can also help students to see so many different disciplines in one thing, one real tangible thing. And so I love giving the example of, like, I've had the opportunity to travel to Pakistan, for instance. And when I was in Lahore, I was given this beautiful beggar's bowl. And within religions and cultures, you do have traditions of wandering mendicants. A lot of scholars like to call them holy fools. And a lot of them have beggar's bowls. And so to bring a beggar's bowl to class and to talk about the philosophy, the history, the politics, of course, the culture within that one object. I don't know why, but students find that helps to integrate it into their own understanding, because they're actually, it becomes, maybe the best way of putting it, becomes alive. And we wish we could all just go there. But,
Yeah, no, I think that approach that's clearly in your teaching would take students beyond the abstraction of knowledge to the consequence of what it means to be human, why it matters that we develop our knowledge and perspective in such things, and how it changes us and changes our contribution to society. I think it's extraordinary, Meena. And I'm grateful to have you share the stories of the mentors who have inspired you, but I'm more grateful that you are engaged in mentoring others across the Laurier campus. I feel fortified by the conversation this afternoon. It was certainly a lovely reflection and opportunity to think about the why behind why we are here in post-secondary, particularly under the extraordinarily challenging circumstances that we are experiencing of late, the importance of the work that we do in preparing our students for the future and cultivating their capacities within disciplines and across disciplines. So my thanks to you for joining me today in conversation, and to the members of the audience for joining us to celebrate teaching excellence and student success. I hope you'll join me again for the next conversation as I continue to celebrate our award recipients and highlight exceptional teaching and exceptional teachers at Laurier. Thank you so much.